Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, y'all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought, of course, that I would talk about this little video and talk about this subject that I thought would be very particularly interesting. And of course, the very huge and colossal super fight or bout that is happening within that of September. I believe on the date it happened, September 13th. Of course, the fight that I'm talking about is that of a Saul Canelo Alvarez versus Terence Bud Crawford. Of course, that is the big colossal super fight that everyone is going to be looking toward to or forward to. And of course, it is right on the horizon. I believe that is probably a little over a month away, but of course, many people, including myself, are very excited to see how this fight could go. I think that it's a fight that could potentially go either way, but I'm probably still going to favor Canelo Alvarez with his combined size and skill. I think that Canelo Alvarez and Crawford at their absolute best, I don't think that they're levels and levels apart in terms of skill. I think that you could debate either fighter over the other, maybe by about a level at most. But to be honest with you, I don't even think that it's that far apart. I think that, they both are great all around fighters and have a complete package. That being stated, there are certain things that both Crawford and Canelo, in my personal view, that they both do that could counter the other style perfectly. But we'll have to see overall, how it ends up. That being stated, there's been a great amount of discussions with Terence Bud Crawford not only moving up the weight classes to fight Canelo Alvarez as of recently, but looking at his most recent physique and his training regimen and other stuff like that. And of course, with him appearing to be a legit 185 pounds, and it appears that he's going to try and compete with Canelo Alvarez on that of a fight night, many people are wondering, especially within this amount of time, is Terence Bud Crawford possibly on a little bit something saucy? Is he possibly on, the juice, or is he on something a little bit extra? And of course, what I'm talking about is that people are alleging that Terence Bud Crawford could be a potential PED and steroid user. But of course, I'll talk about that as it goes along. But anyways, I'm going to talk about both fighters. I'm going to talk about certain points in this video that I thought overall were very particularly interesting. But anyways, let's get into it. This video is going to be by a channel I believe called Bushido Boxing. I don't think that I've ever really reviewed a channel, or excuse me, that I've ever reviewed this channel. If I have, maybe it was one or two videos. But, anyways, let's see what the man has to say. I thought that this conversation was very particularly interesting. But let's get into it.
Remember that bag, I know let's get to it. He cognito, everything fully. You dumb if you think you can duck these bullets.
So now Terence Crawford was on PEDs. Now, ever since Bud Crawford has revealed his new physique, so to speak, ahead of his fight against Canelo Alvarez, now all of a sudden he is juicing.
I need y'all to get the likes up, man. Get the likes up.
But I've been seeing in the boxing community for the past week, ever since Terence Crawford started releasing these compilation videos, started showing how he's kind of just, he's a lot bigger than what we're used to seeing from Terence Crawford.
And in my personal view, I don't think that that's the best of strategies. There are certain things that both fighters, in my personal view, that they can do to counter the other very decently well. Canelo not only has a great counter game at his absolute best, but what I will personally state is this. Canelo has not been as good of a counter puncher, at least overall within that of the mid-range within most recent years. He's really, kind of adapted more of that, I'm not going to say brawling style, but, kind of try to beat you up on the inside. He will counter very well on the inside, but I think also to have the best luck against Crawford, at least if, a great version of Crawford shows up within that fight, that he will have to mix it up a little bit also in the mid-range. Mainly, 90% you want to keep this on the inside and up against the ropes, but keep Crawford guessing. You don't want to just keep doing overall the same offense. But that being said, Canelo is adaptable. He is someone that, of course, is very great, especially within that range. But that being stated, Terence Bud Crawford, one of the key advantages that he would have over Canelo Alvarez, in my personal view, would be his hand speed and his feet and his foot speed. Why would you really want to decline that, at least to a massive degree, over against Canelo Alvarez, gain a substantial amount of weight, possibly, not really be comfortable in the ring because you're at a weight that you've never been at before. On top of that, you've been out of the ring for what, over a year now? And you're going to be damn near 38 years old? I mean, to me, in my personal view, and I mean, you never know. There's been fighters overall that do certain things to where people say, I don't think that that's the best idea, and they know their body better than the rest. Like Tyson Fury did that against Wilder, but I mean, that Tyson, when he did that against Wilder, I wasn't really super concerned with that because Tyson Fury is a heavier built man. He's someone that, overall could honestly get to about 280 pounds and, he's probably fine. So Tyson Fury is not really someone overall that ever really concerned me that much with it, and especially because Wilder is a type of fighter that you can utilize that against, but I knew that it was going to be a problem in the Usyk rematch because he gained too much weight and you were not going to be able to do that against a fighter that is that maneuverable, that defensively responsible, that great, and on top of that, that small. So it's already difficult enough to hit him, But anyways, not to digress too much. Point is that one of Crawford's advantages would overall be, to kind of use his feet and his foot speed and the lateral movement. And in my personal view, gaining a certain amount of movement like that, it would take a lot of those possible advantages away. Because I don't care what people say. I don't care how many of these Crawford fanboys want to go on this tirade of saying, "Oh, y'all don't know Crawford. He's a dog like that." All sort of bullshit, right? But that's not an intelligent boxing breakdown. I've heard that argument for many, many years. "Oh, you don't know this brother. This guy overall is a real dog." All this sort of bullshit, right? But being a dog, it doesn't win you a boxing fight. I mean, at times it can, but at the end of the day, there's 27 other different factors that we have to factor into. And if you're a guy overall that should be using his foot speed and his hand speed for this fight, why in the hell would you really want to gain, 20 pounds for this fight? I could see maybe an extra 10, but why the hell would you want to be 185 on fight night? To me, it just doesn't really make any sense. To me, what this fight is very reminiscent of, is that of a Sugar Ray Leonard versus a Marvin Hagler. Why would you want to be damn near the same weight as a Canelo Alvarez? To me, it just makes no sense. I understand that you want to try to hurt him, so I understand a little bit of a weight gain, but in my view, it would be more beneficial in order to have a little bit more speed, both in your feet and both in your hands, because you're not adjusted to that weight class. And what I'm going to say about Crawford is this: Crawford is not someone like a Floyd Mayweather that is just this defensive wizard. He's someone that, is very good defensively at times, but he's someone that, in my personal view, is just a little bit too hittable. And it's not like he has the strongest chin that I've ever personally seen in my life. I'm not claiming that he has a glass jaw necessarily, but he can be hurt. So I just don't think overall that it's advisable. I wouldn't advise it. But like I said, I'm not a professional boxing trainer. I'm not someone that is a professional nutritionist. But just off of what I've seen in boxing's history and past, usually when that ends up happening, it don't end up well. But we'll see.
But now there's a narrative that Bud Crawford has been cheating. He's cheating. Why? Because, he's associated with Snack, Victor Conte, etc., etc., etc. People put two and two together. Well, they assume since Victor Conte knows how to get around Vada, etc., well, then Terence Crawford must be cheating.
Snack, and I know some news came out this week and all of that, but I personally believe that Snack is clean. I think it's a conflict of interest, the fact that, hey, he knows how to beat the system, quote unquote, Victor Conte.
Well, this is what I'm going to personally state. And in terms of the quote-unquote Terence Bud Crawford PEDs thing, do I believe that Terence Bud Crawford is more than likely on some performance-enhancing drug? More than likely, yes. It just is what it is. And that in no way is me trying to discredit Terence Bud Crawford as an all-around great fighter or him as an all-time great fighter. As we know, there have been many great fighters or great athletes that have been caught on performance-enhancing drugs or that I believe to be on performance-enhancing drugs. Sugar Shane Mosley, of course, at one point in time was caught on PEDs, and he is one of the greater fighters we've ever seen. Of course, I believe that Manny Pacquiao was on a certain amount of performance-enhancing drugs for a while in his career, and he, in my personal view, would be a top 10 boxer of all time. Juan Manuel Marquez, I believe, was on a little something towards the end of his career. I think that there's a multitude of other boxers. Canelo Alvarez, of course, who I believe is an all-time great level boxer, debatably the greatest Mexican fighter of all time. He's someone that, in my view, not even in my view, he's someone that has 100% for sure been caught on performance-enhancing drugs. So, the point is, overall, is that, there are many athletes overall that I believe are on performance-enhancing drugs. Whether you want to take away from their greatness because of that, that's up to you. But to me, I don't personally do that because there's just so many boxers, in my view, that are more than likely on it that it's a little bit tough to tell who is and who is not on it. But the point is that, I remember when Manny Pacquiao, for example, I remember when he was during his prime and he was knocking out guys like Ricky Hatton and Miguel Cotto and Morales and all these other guys, and people were stating that, wow, this is super interesting that he keeps moving up one weight class and he appears to have the same speed and the same level of strength. Something seems a little bit fishy with this guy. But yet, no, and so people said the same thing with the Roy Jones. And Roy Jones gained like 20 pounds of muscle mass for his move up to the heavyweight division to fight John Ruiz. But Terence Bud Crawford, he gains a substantial amount of weight. And on top of that, at one time he wanted to move up 3 weight classes. Of course Terence Bud Crawford could possibly be on PEDs. Now, is it a confirmation? No, but in my personal view, like I stated, anyone with the snack program, just my perspective, you don't have to agree with me, but just my perspective, anyone with the snack program, Devin Haney, Caleb Plant, Andrade, Terence Crawford, Shakur Stevenson, they're more than likely on some sort of performance enhancing drug, especially when they're working with a man that at one point in time was the world's top supplier or one of the world's top suppliers in PEDs to many known level athletes across the world. And on top of that, knew how to get past the system. So yes, in my view, he more than likely is on something. It just is what it is. And Canelo more than likely is on something as well. We already know that Canelo Alvarez has been called in that quote-unquote special beef before. So, I mean, it is what it is.
But at the same time, I think snack, you got products going around the world, this and that. I mean, all these athletes are testing. They're not testing anything or positive by using snack at all. So I think they...
Right, but dude, come on. Timothy Bradley, come on. And I like Timothy Bradley as a boxing analyzer. They're not giving them overall just regular food, dude. They're not just giving them regular products. What they're giving them overall is possibly PEDs with their products or some amount of other things. What snack is overall more than likely is pretty much just a cover up, and they say, oh, well, we sell natural supplements and all this other shit. Right, but they're not giving, overall people like, me or you, regular overall people that want to be world-class professional athletes. They're not giving them overall the same shit that they're giving them. I mean, come on.
Hey, there's no doubt about it. So, with that being said, I'm not worried about that. As long as they testing, I'm good.
I don't care what you people say about Terence Crawford for the rest of his career. In my opinion, that dude is a juice monster. I just saw him working out ahead of the Canelo Alvarez fight. The dude looks like Hulk fucking Hogan. Nigga, get off that shit before...
Hulk Hogan, who of course recently passed away recently. Of course, a very impactful dude in the wrestling business, but no offense against Hulk Hogan, but if it wasn't the racist, shit overall that he said, it was always something else. I never heard one good thing about that dude. Pretty much everything overall that I heard about that guy, he was one of the biggest snakes, basically in whatever business that he worked in. Also a pathological liar. But anyway, and I'm not claiming that I knew him personally or anything like that, but basically anyone that knew him pretty much thought that he was a piece of shit. But anyway.
It kills you. Jesus Christ, bro. You got arrow with it? Cool. Stop doing the shit. You're overdoing it, bro. Don't nobody believe.
Now, you notice, of course, for people that don't know this boxing channel right here, Bushido, I believe, probably took a little snippet from here. He's, of course, recording that, I believe, of Fannin, International Boxing, whatever it is. Fannin, of course, is known as a quote-unquote PBC fanboy. So, of course, he probably is a little bit pissed off, and still a little bit bitter that Terence Crawford whooped up on Errol Spence Jr. Now, could Crawford maybe have been on PEDs in that fight? I mean, more than likely. But I mean, in my personal view, that was not the main reason why Spence lost the fight. Am I claiming that performance-enhancing drugs, that they don't enhance your performance and enhance your athleticism? I'm not claiming that at all. But Errol Spence, it's no offense, but Jesus Christ, even if Terence Crawford was on steroids in that fight and Spence was not on steroids, like, Jesus fucking Christ, like, dude, like, for a quote-unquote super fight, I've never seen a more pathetic super fight in my life. And I'm not, in no way is I me trying to discredit Terence Crawford, but Spence, come on, dude. Like, you were supposed to put up a better fight than that. I wouldn't have been surprised that Terence Crawford won. Now, I believe that I had predicted Spence because I thought that the pressure and the size and the strength was going to be a bit too much, but I did claim that if this fight stays in the mid-range, or the long range, there's no way that Spence is going to win the fight because he can't compete in those categories. And that's exactly what ended up happening when he was in the mid-range. But Spence, overall, in my personal view, he didn't really quite, approach the fight as good as what he needed to. In my view, the time off probably did, unfortunately make him a little bit rusty. But that being claimed, I'm not going to sit here and claim to you that that's the only reason why Spence lost the fight. Crawford just showed that he was a much greater fighter and much more skilled fighter than what Spence ever was. It just is what it is. And I know that a lot of, certain LDBC channels are still bitter about that, but I mean, it's whatever. Spence ended up losing, that's just how it is.
Shit. You look like a goddamn NFL linebacker, nigga, jumping the ropes with weights on your vest. Nigga, you look like a juice monster. Fuck off, Terence Crawford. I don't believe shit about your career. Personally...
Damn it, I get people overall claiming on my channel that I'm a Crawford hater. Jesus Christ. This man said, Fuck you, Terence Crawford. Said, I don't believe shit about your career.
I don't believe a fucking thing about your career because you look like a fucking steroid monster trying to cheat Canelo Alvarez, who's a steroid monster. Cheating on.
I agree. And, let me also state this. You have certain people, of course, mentioning overall that Terence Crawford might be on performance-enhancing drugs and that the snack people might be on performance-enhancing drugs. And I agree. But listen, the thing does have to be addressed. Canelo and his whole entire squad have been caught in performance-enhancing drugs. Almost every one. Like, the only one that overall, the only one, that wasn't caught in performance-enhancing drugs was Andrew Ruiz Jr. I mean, shit, the only way that Andrew Ruiz ever would get a PED in his fucking system is if it was what the hell is the word that I'm looking for? If it was, if it was disguised as a cheeseburger, that's really the only fucking way he's gonna get a PED in the system. I mean, anyway.
Cheating. Disgusting.
This is what people are saying, right? Forget about the fact that we actually got cheaters in the sport of boxing who actually get caught for testing positive. Forget that fact, right? Forget that there's guys like Ryan Garcia. Anybody that was been associated with Eddie Reynoso for the past several years has tested positive. For whatever reason, these guys are testing positive on that side of things. But nobody wants to say nothing about Jaime Munguia and Francisco Rodriguez, Canelo Alvarez, right? They don't want to say nothing about that, but we just go say guys like Terence Crawford is on PEDs. We're going to say guys like Errol the Truth, Big Fish Spence Jr. is on PEDs, right? These guys never test positive. Oh, Anthony Joshua, yeah, him too. He was on PEDs.
Well, I mean, there's no offense against AJ Anthony Joshua. And I actually supported Joshua a lot throughout, overall his career. I think that AJ at times has gotten a lot of unnecessary criticism, mainly from these emotional ass, Deontay Wilder pro-Blackley fans. But I mean, it is what it is. But anyways, point being overall is that, AJ Anthony Josh, I mean, no offense, but I take a look at that dude. That dude does not appear natural to me. The dude's built like a bodybuilder. I'm sorry.
None of these guys test positive ever in their career. Deontay Wilder, oh, well, he's another one. There's no way he's hitting that hard. PEDs.
I've never once ever heard anyone claim that Deontay Wilder is on PEDs. Never once. I mean, I could be wrong about that. I'm sure with Bushido Boxing that more than likely he was probably a Deontay Wilder fan. I could be wrong. So maybe I'm sure there's been people overall that have claimed that, but I've never heard a channel in particular ever really claim that Deontay Wilder was on performance-enhancing drugs. I've never really seen that narrative with him. I've seen it with AJ. I've seen it with Fury. I've seen it with Canelo and Crawford. I've seen it with Pacquiao. I've never once seen it overall with Wilder.
Right? Guys just can't be gifted. Guys can't just have a special talent. Guys just can't grow as people and get bigger over the years. Terence Crawford is...
Well, listen, the fact remains is that Terence Crawford is with one of the world's former top suppliers of PEDs. That's the fact that remains. I mean, it is what it is. You can make whatever conclusion you want to. In your personal view, if that's not enough for you, then, I mean, that's up to you. But in my personal view, Victor Conte has even stated himself he's worked hand in hand with Vada before. On top of that, he knows how to get past the system. He knows overall how to do it to the point to where you will not get caught, to a certain degree. And then on top of that, overall, he knows how to get past the system. So, I mean, to me, there's not really much more that needs to be exposed.
Almost a 40-year-old man now. He sat out for quite a while. Normally, Crawford probably likes to keep his weight down, right? But then he kind of let things go, probably ate a little more. He grew right into their frame, right? And for the people who probably seen Bud Crawford in person, they say Bud Crawford ain't necessarily a small guy. He's not necessarily a small guy, right? And the guy can't be considered a small guy when you have arms that's damn near touching your ankles. You can't necessarily be that.
I agree with that. And let me also state this, although, of course, Canelo should be the favorite in this fight because, not only is he a great fighter, but, of course, he also will have the weight advantage. Let me also claim this. You got some of these guys that keep talking all this shit heading into this fight, claiming all this stuff about how Canelo Alvarez, that, he's 10 times bigger than Crawford, and then all this other stuff, that Crawford can do it, because Canelo's this one-dimensional fighter. All I'm going to claim is this. If you're one of these guys that claim that Canelo Alvarez isn't anywhere near as skilled as a Terence Crawford or that Canelo is just his quote-unquote one-dimensional fighter, no problem. But then, just in my personal view, if Canelo Alvarez ends up beating Terence Bud Crawford's ass, you're either going to have to admit one or two things to me. Just in my personal view, either A, that Terence Bud Crawford was not as good as what you thought he was, overall, or that B, that Canelo Alvarez is greater than what you thought he was. You can't have it both ways. You can't say this shit overall and go on this tirade of saying that Canelo is this overrated boxer and that he's someone that isn't even close. And then Canelo Alvarez, he might potentially whoop Crawford's ass. Not saying it will happen, saying if it does happen. And then overall just claim all this shit about, oh well, he was too big. No, if you thought that Crawford was gonna go in and completely whoop Canelo Alvarez's ass, put your money where your mouth is. Keep that same energy. Once again, I don't mind, people getting a prediction wrong, or even analyzing a fight wrong. Even it happens to me sometimes, although I would say that myself, I'm a good boxing analyst. I'm someone that gets a lot of my fight predictions correct. But of course, we all get fight predictions wrong. The thing is that, I don't mind overall you getting things wrong, but don't, do this bullshit to where you try to have it both ways. To where overall you clearly just don't like one side, or you don't like Canelo Alvarez, because that's exactly what Dante and Aki TV are going to do if Canelo Alvarez ends up whooping Terence Bud Crawford's ass. They're going to claim that it's a 50-50 fight heading into it and that, overall Canelo was super overrated, one-dimensional, blah, blah, blah. No problem. But then if Crawford ends up losing in dominant fashion, don't compare him to fighters like Alexander Usyk who did it to Tyson Fury. Because if Canelo Alvarez is allegedly one-dimensional and then on top of that Crawford has the longer reach and the longer height, don't sit here and tell me overall that, Crawford is 20 times better than Canelo Alvarez, or that Canelo Alvarez, is just still this one-dimensional fighter. Don't sit here and tell me that. One of things overall is going to have to be true. Either A, Crawford is not on the level of guys like Usyk, if that ends up happening, or he's not as good as what you thought, or B, Canelo Alvarez is greater than what you thought. One of two things is going to have to be true.
Small of a guy, yeah, you may be short, so to speak, right, in some regards, but not necessarily small. But now all of a sudden he's testing positive, right?
Right, but I don't think anyone has stated that Terence Bud Crawford has tested positive. I think what they've stated is more than likely that Terence Bud Crawford, especially with who he's working with, knows how to get around the system. And I agree with that as well.
Gonna test positive some way or another. Vada's gonna get him. Oh, you know what? Better yet, he knows how to get around Vada. Because he knows Victor Conte.
Right, but Victor Conte has already stated in the past very blatantly that he knew how to get past the drug testing, so why would he not know how to do it again? And then on top of that, if he works hand in hand with Vada at times, why would he not be paying some of these guys off, overall, or paying them a share to possibly miss, overall positive test here and there or something like that? Why would that not be possible? So I'm sorry, but if you're working with someone overall with a company that, once again is one of the former top supplier at PEDs in the world, and I think that I had one person over ask me, they said, well, Victor Conte over, why would he risk that? Because overall, certain fines and other stuff like that. Victor Conte will tell you himself. He stated the reason why he did it in the first place is because the penalization is very low. You don't really get any massive jail time for this or anything like that. And then on top of that, you make millions upon billions of dollars. So why wouldn't it be worth it? And then on top of that, you have successful athletes and it looks even better for your product and your company. So, come on.
Because he's part of the snack program. Not to forget the fact that Virgil Ortiz was representing and sponsored by Snack and Bam Rodriguez and amongst other guys, right?
Right, and they're more than likely on PEDs as well.
Forget that. We're just going to forget about that and just focus on Terence. There's no way he's that big. How? He's juicing. Then see him lift now weights. He already told us he don't lift weights, right? He just can't. He got to be cheating. Boxing fans for years have been harder on guys that they assume is on something versus the guys that actually get caught on being on something.
And I somewhat agree with that, but what I will personally state is this. If you're one of these channels, and I can't speak for Bushido because I don't really know him like that, but the thing is overall is that if you also were one of these guys that were suspicious of Manny Pacquiao moving up one weight class at a time and having the same amount of speed and strength, overall, then basically shouldn't you be a little bit suspicious with Terence Bud Crawford overall trying to move up 2 to 3 weight classes? Now he's only moving up 2 weight classes officially, but the thing is that even at one time he tried to move up 3 weight classes. Not even Manny Pacquiao tried to do that. So the thing is that wouldn't you think that that's a little bit fishy? So I mean, just in my personal view, is Crawford probably on some? He probably is. But that being stated, to me, it's even game because we all know that Canelo more than likely is on some also.
For years, it's been like this. Now they saying it about Bud Crawford. They never necessarily said this about Terence Crawford until now. They can't explain it. This guy.
Well, there are certain people actually overall that have been claiming it for a while. I'm not really going to state that. You might have more people that are claiming it now because, of course, this is clearly the biggest fight of his career. And Canelo Alvarez has been the face of boxing for the past decade. So, I mean, that's probably what you're saying it now. But I've seen people overall really claim this for the past few years. And it's not overall, just boxing fans or certain things like that. It's also, certain fighters. Gervonta Tank Davis has also claimed, although, of course, he has a little bit of a beef with certain fighters like a Devin Haney and Crawford, he also has alleged that he believes the snack program is a little bit suspicious. But I agree with him.
I hops every hurdle put in front of him. The wrong side of the street. Well, he found a way to cross the street, right? Like everything put in front of Bud Crawford.
He did, but let me also state this. Because a lot of the Terence Bud Crawford fan base, they either go, they of course go in this extremist direction, claiming that, Crawford was avoided by everybody and blah, 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 and all sort of stuff. He couldn't get anyone to fight him. He had the opportunity to sign with the PBC and Showtime. And I know that a certain amount of people overall will claim, they still would have avoided him over there. How do you know that? Because the Showtime and the PBC was putting on many, many, many big fights with the welterweight division at the time. They had the Keith Thurman and Danny Garcia fight when they were undefeated. They had the Sean Porter Errol Spence fight when both of those guys were champions. They had the Kell Brook and Errol Spence fight even when Kell Brook was trying to get out of that fight. They had Sean Porter and Kell Brook when they were both undefeated there. They had Danny Garcia versus Errol Spence there. They had Yordenis Ugas versus Sean Porter. They had Manny Pacquiao versus Keith Thurman. They had Keith Thurman versus Sean Porter. So what makes you think that Crawford possibly would have not gotten any of those fighters over there? I'm sorry, I'm just not biting it.
Every narrative put out that Bud Crawford seems to overcome these obstacles. Overcame Bob Arum, even sued him on his way out. I mean, he just did all that, right? Getting the bag now from Turkey and all this other stuff, right? BLK Prime wanted to do business with him. They said he wasn't selling, right?
Right, and he wasn't selling. When have you ever seen Terence Bud Crawford be a major draw? There's no offense against Terence Bud Crawford. Crawford is an all-time great level fighter, but there's certain fighters that are all-time great level fighters, and they're not big draws. Terence Bud Crawford is one of those fighters. It just is what it is. He's not someone that is looked at as particularly charismatic. He's not looked at as someone overall that, has the personality to be the quote-unquote face of boxing. He never was. People overall trying to make certain people into things that they aren't because they want certain things to be true. Terence Crawford was never the face of boxing. He was never the biggest draw. To be honest with you, he really wasn't even in the top 5 of the biggest draws in boxing, ever. It is what it is. And I know that a certain amount of people overall that they're not going to like that, but it's just is what it is. Can you tell me one pay-per-view other than the Errol Spence Jr. fight that did extraordinarily well? You can't tell me one. Every other one was pretty much a flop compared to what it really should have been. He did like 50,000 to 47,000 pay-per-view buys with Victor Postol. He did a lot less than what was expected with Sean Porter. He didn't do that well with Israel Madrimov. He did really, to be quite honest with you, even with the Errol Spence Jr. fight, it was expected to do a decent amount more than what it did.
They said he wasn't a draw, but I'm looking around. But they got to find something, right? They got to find something.
You're looking around at what? At the flopping pay-per-views that Terence Bud Crawford had? Once again, don't get it twisted, but let's not make Terence Bud Crawford into something that he's not. He's a great all-time great level fighter. But all these, guys that are whining and complaining about people saying Crawford's not a draw, he ain't a draw. And I'm not claiming that he's not a draw completely, but he's not a pay-per-view, superstar. He never has been that guy. He's a guy overall, that will be on a pay-per-view here and there, and usually the numbers aren't going to do that particularly well. That's just how his career's panned out.
Because they can't find nothing. This is kind of how it goes. You got big channels, right? Some of your favorite YouTubers is coming out here putting this negative energy out into the boxing universe when Terence Crawford is arguably one of the cleanest fighters that we've seen in and out of the ring. One of the cleanest fighters we've seen. Don't do nothing, no partying, right? No drinking, no none of that stuff, right? His fights.
Well, I'm not going to claim that. And the reason why I say that is because I'm from Omaha, Nebraska, and I've had a few friends that have actually met Terence Bud Crawford in real life. He sometimes will go out to the bars. He's not someone overall that, overall is just, never drinking more than likely or, just never going out clubbing or anything like that. We know that Terence Crawford sometimes will go out, but that being claimed, Is he someone overall that, is a lush like what Errol Spence used to be or something like that? No. One thing I'll give Terence Bud Crawford a lot of credit for is that he's always keeping himself in shape. He goes for bike rides, I believe. He'll do the jogging and the running up, that one Colorado mountain, I believe. Terence Bud Crawford is always usually in great, great condition.
Or even clean. He don't be low blowing dudes, headbutting and doing none of that.
Now, the one thing that I will claim that in my view, other than the snack thing, that is a little bit suspicious in Crawford's career, although in my view, I don't really like to allege this because there's not 100% evidence for this, but I did find it a little bit odd that on 2 separate occasions, there seemed to be something up with Terence Bud Crawford's gloves. And what I mean is that in the David Avanesian fight, both gloves ended up popping open. And I remember when, Tyson Fury allegedly had that glove gate and all that bullshit, although Deontay Wilder's coaches, they thoroughly checked his gloves and all that stuff. I mean, maybe one can make the same thing with the Terence Bud Crawford. But the thing is that, there was never really any legitimate proof, with Tyson Fury that he had removed any padding or anything like that. But with Terence Bud Crawford, interestingly enough, in that fight, both gloves ended up popping open. I've never seen that in a professional bout before, ever. So it's just interesting. And then on top of that, that wasn't the only time that it happened. He had something apparently weird with his gloves right before the Israel Madrimov fight to where they had to be, kind of swapped out. So it's interesting. Is it possible that maybe Crawford is maneuvering some padding or possibly taking out some padding? Who knows? Maybe that's the reason why he has such destructive power. Now, it could be, once again, I'm not saying that with 100% certainty. I'm just saying it's a possibility. You never know. That is the one thing I will claim that, in my view, was always a little bit suspicious that I've seen about Terence Bud Crawford. But other than that, the man has had a pretty clean career.
Cool stuff.
And who knows? That could be coincidental. Maybe not, but, you never know.
This dude ain't even got a split decision. He never got no majority decision or a draw or anything like that. He has arguably one of the cleanest boxing careers ever. When you hear guys speak, what Oscar De La Hoya say when he asked again about the fight? He went all the way back to Gamboa. A fight that happened when Crawford was 16-0 and Gamboa was 16-0. There was a crossroads fight between two guys that was on their way. Who was going to...
They weren't 16-0 at the time. Gamboa, I don't know what his record was, but his fights, I believe, were in the 20s, and Terence Bud Crawford's fights were certainly in the 20s. He was like 21 to 24-0. I can't remember at the time, but that's what he was. So to say that Crawford was 16-0, you don't know what the hell you're talking about, dude.
Take it to the next level. Crossroads type of fight. They got to go back that far to when he was 16-0. He's 41.
Now, that being stated overall, and once again, this guy doesn't know what the hell he's talking about with that. But the point being is that a lot of people, of course, what Oscar De La Hoya recently stated is that he believes that Crawford can be hurt because we've seen it against Gamboa, and I agree. Because one of the few things that usually do not improve over time is your chin. And I'm not claiming, once again, that Crawford, that he's not someone that, I'm not claiming that he has a glass jaw necessarily, but he is someone that definitely can be more hurt than a Canelo Alvarez. It just is what it is. That's one of the advantages that Canelo would have over a Crawford. But it's, it's whatever. But anyways, the point is that, also what I will personally state is this. In my view, Crawford has improved over time, but so has Canelo Alvarez. So we'll see. So a lot of people, of course, comparing the Mayweather and Canelo Alvarez fight. In my view, I don't know if it's going to be that similar. And the reason why I claim that is because not only has Canelo gotten better ever since that time, but on top of that, Crawford is actually going to be trying to compete with Canelo in terms of the weight. One of the very big advantages that Mayweather had over Canelo was not just skills, overall, especially in terms of feet, but he also, knew to fight at his speed and at his weight. Why the hell would you want to try to gain weight, try to compete with, Canelo Alvarez in that area? To me, it's just not a very good idea. The reason why Mayweather was so dominant in that fight, not only because he's an astronomically skilled fighter, but because he also kept his advantage of speed.
Now.
Both of his feet, and his body and his movement and his punches.
That's how 12 years ago they have to go back to find something. They can't find nothing. So we just going to pin the fact that he's dealing with Vada, he's dealing with Victor Conte and Snack.
Right, but no offense, dude, but you're kind of coming across as a whiny Terence Bud Crawford fanboy. Is no offense. I can understand about the steroid things, but all this other stuff about the Gamboa stuff, that's something that could be relevant to the situation. And I'm guessing, more than likely, that you're going to be talking about Canelo versus Mayweather, which is a fight that happened over 12 years ago. So, I mean, the point is that if you're also going to mention that, why would that not be relevant to the conversation? We have to, kind of provide evidence that might be relevant.
He must be on the attack. We must stop his attack because he's dealing with Snack. Right? Not knowing, right, that Vada can pop up at anywhere at any time. Anywhere in the world, Vada will.
Right, that's great, but everyone pretty much knows that, dude. The point is that Victor Conte has basically stated that he has found a way to basically get past, their detections. So, I mean, it is what it is.
Know where you're at, and they will pop up on you when it's that time. But this is what's going on right now in the boxing community. To take away the fact that Canelo Alvarez, he hardly even started camp.
Right, but is that really true? Like it's no offense against this dude, but this guy just comes across to me as another one of these whiny LDBC channels that really oftentimes doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. You tell me that Canelo Alvarez, that he has a big up-and-coming fight, one of the biggest fights of his career, where he takes a look at it as his rematch against Floyd Mayweather, at least from my perspective, and he hasn't started camp yet, and the fight is less than a month, is like about a month away. Yeah, okay, I'm believing that.
Right? He's hardly even started camp.
And then on top of that, Canelo Alvarez has posted training videos of him, I believe, for like the past month or two. Like, what are you talking about, dude?
Ahead of this thing, how is he going to prepare for this guy is the big question.
Canelo looked elite against Billy Joe Saunders, but Saunders exposed the flaw. Canelo struggles with rhythm, movement, and fluidity. Then came Caleb Plant, slick, yes, but untested. Canelo walked him down and got the finish.
I believe that I've seen that breakdown. Now what I will personally state is this. Crawford overall is someone that definitely can use his advantage with the elite, not only jab, but on top of that with his feet. That being stated, Canelo Alvarez, do not underestimate his lead hand. And on the inside, in my view, Canelo Alvarez will have the edge. That being stated, Canelo Alvarez, in my view, was relatively dominant over both Saunders and that of a Caleb Plant. But Crawford, in my view, does have better feet and better movement than them, at least in terms of his feet. That being stated, Crawford doesn't really have quite the upper body movement as certain people overall will really claim that he does, which you can see not only against Aegis Velasquez, but you can also see against, other fighters, Madrimov. You can see it a little bit against Kell Brook. You can see it against Sean Porter. You can see it a little bit against Yuriorkis Gamboa. You can see it a little bit in other fights as well. Crawford is an all-time great fighter, and he does have excellent upper body movement. But Canelo, in terms of upper body movement, is literally up there with anyone that I've ever seen. Now, in terms of feet, Crawford is up there with anyone that I've ever seen. But Canelo Alvarez, in terms of upper body movement and defensive ability, he's up there with guys, in my personal view, that are the best of the best. Crawford, in terms of defensive ability, he's at his best a very good defensive fighter. He's not a great one. He's only had one great defensive performance, as I've already stated, and that was his performance over Errol Spence. But if you take a look at a lot of his other fights, his defense can be a bit too leaky.
But Bivol wasn't like the others. He controlled range, stayed disciplined, and kept the pace high. Canelo looked lost, flat-footed.
Bivol definitely overall did keep the pace high, but it's a little bit hard for me to just completely judge off of that fight. And the reason why I claim that is not because Bivol did not counter certain things that Canelo did well, but it's also hard to judge because Canelo Alvarez just doesn't belong in that weight class. Like, he tried to compete with Bivol overall in terms of size and strength, and it really tired him out after about 4 rounds. And then on top of that, he doesn't belong in that weight class. Dimitri Bivol is a legit light heavyweight. He's someone that's a bit lighter sometimes than other light heavyweights, but he's a guy that's fought there his whole entire career and been adjusted. And then on top of that, he had certain things that could counter Canelo well. It still was actually pretty amazing that Canelo was able to win about 3 to 4 rounds in that fight. But that goes to show you how great that Canelo still actually is. But I mean, the point being is that Dimitri Bivol did do certain things that were very, very great in that fight. But that being stated, it's a little bit hard for me to judge because Canelo and Bivol are not the same size.
One pace for straight, then back to Triple G.
And Canelo, in my view, is not really even a natural 168-pounder. He's really more of a 160-pounder. So he's a guy that never should have been a 175 in the first place.
Rider, flat-footed, forward styles. Suddenly, Canelo looks sharp again because there's not form.
Well, Golovkin isn't really flat-footed. At times, he can be flat-footed, but he's someone actually that can be on his toes. He's just not someone that is phenomenally quick in terms of feet. But if Terence Crawford is gaining all this weight, I'm not quite sure if he's going to be phenomenally fast in terms of feet in this fight either. So we'll see.
Its opponents. Now enters Terence Crawford, not just slick, he's surgical. He controls space like Bivol, but with better timing and switch hitting. If Bivol could shut Canelo down over 12...
Well, let me also address this, because people people always go on this switch hitting shit. It depends on what you mean by switch hitting. If you're talking about kind of switching the momentum after certain punches and then being in proper position, then okay, yeah, you can claim that. But the thing is that Canelo Alvarez, does that to a degree as well. But if you're talking about Terence Bud Crawford, that, he can switch from any stance, and hit Canelo, like, if Terence Bud Crawford fights, at right-hand stances, to say, for a decent amount of the fight, he's going to get knocked out. Crawford is not a great right-hander. He's a great southpaw, but he's not a great right-hander.
Crawford might not even let him start.
Because now the size and the weight narrative is starting to slowly disappear more and more as the weeks go by. To now, we're going to say, well, this dude looks too big. He might be bigger than Canelo, for real, for real. He is on PEDs. This is what they do. Guys come out of here and they start insinuating. Guys with channels, guys that got a huge following, guys that, boxing fans, they take their word as gospel. And then they putting this bad energy, this negative. If they never tested positive before, you can't say they some cheaters, bro. That's why I never got down when they were saying Errol Spence must be on something. Nah, he must not be on nothing. Some guys they physically, genetically gifted. Some guys...
Well, there's no doubt that both Terence Bud Crawford and Canelo Alvarez, they're both physically, genetically gifted. They're both phenomenal level athletes. And Crawford, of course, is a phenomenal level athlete. There's no doubt about it. But there are plenty of phenomenal level athletes that more than likely are on performance-enhancing drugs. Manny Pacquiao overall was a great athlete. He was someone that was a naturally born gifted athlete. Do I believe that he was still on PEDs? Yes, I do. It just is what it is. John Jones, of course, is one of the greater gifted athletes that I've ever seen. He's been caught on PEDs like 17 different times. So, I mean, just because you're a phenomenally gifted athlete doesn't mean overall that you're still not on performance-enhancing drugs.
You can cut the weight and still be great. Some guys can do this and do that. Other guys can't. Right? We are not all created equal. We're not. Some guys genetically, this is ahead of the curve, bro. Some of us got to work a lot harder. Right? Sorry that some people just can't win. They didn't win the genetic Olympics, man. They couldn't make it to the genetic Olympics, bro. They just couldn't make it. Some people made it. Some people can...
Right, and that's great. But the fact remains is that Terence Bud Crawford was willing to move up 3 separate weight classes a while ago. And then on top of that, Terence Bud Crawford, he has seemed to gain a lot of weight within a short amount of time. And on top of that, he's working with a former supplier of PEDs. So, I mean, come on.
Cut a lot of weight. Jared Hurd was a big guy, cutting a lot of weight, was able to make it down and still put out. You know what I'm saying? That was just one of his special abilities.
Right, but cutting overall at a weight class, overall is a little bit different, than gaining 20 pounds of muscle, within a month's amount of time.
Right? Are we going to say he was just juicing? No.
Right, but that situation isn't even similar. Like, why would you even mention that? That makes no fucking sense.
Never got tested, never got caught up.
Like, is Sebastian Fundora on PEDs because he's cutting at a weight class that he clearly shouldn't be at? Is Rafael Espinosa on PEDs? Like, there's so many fighters that have done that within the history of boxing. Like, it doesn't even make any fucking sense. Like, what are you talking about?
Never tested positive, but then you got guys like Ryan Garcia testing positive for Austrian. Conor Benn, who I like, by the way, tested positive for some eggs and some whatever, Austrian 2 or something. I forgot what it was. Jared Big Baby Miller, who now is in a good grace of boxing fans, but he had a steroid cocktail, get tested positive.
Yes, he did, and I believe that he was suspended for about 2 to 3 years.
Just kept testing positive, just wouldn't stop testing positive.
Yes, and he was tested. He tested positive, I believe, about a few times, so he had to be suspended. It is what it is.
Big chubby guy. It's not the big muscular guy like Anthony Joshua that looks like an action figure. It's not that guy that's testing positive, but everybody wanted to assume that AJ was on some juice. AJ never tested positive.
Right, but in my personal view, AJ is more than likely on something. Just my view of it. I could be wrong, but, I'm sorry, but you don't usually get a build like that. Just my view of it. Although some people would disagree.
Right? So, this is what boxing fans do. When they just can't, when every obstacle, every narrative they try to put out there gets debunked or thwarted. They want to come with something else. Now Bud Crawford, all of a sudden, is just juicing. He got to be juicing. He got to be doing something. There's just no way he should be this big going into this fight with Canelo Alvarez.
I don't care what you people say about Terence Crawford for the rest of his career. In my opinion, that dude is a juice monster.
But I still got the question, how is Canelo Alvarez going to deal with Terence Bud Crawford if the weight is not a factor?
The Charlo's 154. He ain't got power like Terence Crawford. He ain't got stamina like Terence Crawford. He ain't got skills or a resume. And Canelo couldn't do nothing. Canelo tried to be physical with Charlo, tried to walk him down, bully him, load up.
You can tell this guy overall breaking down the video overall really doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. This guy overall claimed that this guy is basing it off of basically surface level stuff. That Jermell Charlo, that he doesn't have the power, all sort of stuff. Dude, Jermell Charlo is a major hitter at 154. We've never even seen Terence Bud Crawford above 154. And the one fight that he did have at 154, his power didn't seem to really be the same. So, I mean, all these are stuff. And Canelo cut the ring off against Jermell Charlo very well. But that being claimed, Jermell Charlo is not someone that's as all-around skilled as Crawford. He's just not. You know, Jermell Charlo, in terms of skills, has been one of the more overrated fighters of the past many years. But I mean, it is what it is. But that being stated, I thought Canelo had a very great performance. It wasn't flawless in my personal view. But you know, it is what it is. But that being stated, Jermell Charlo is a guy that easily could be a middleweight fighter. He's really more of a middleweight, really more than what he is a 154-pounder. Crawford is really more of a 147-pounder. He's not even the same size as a Charlo. So the point being is that the gain weight, you know, and then on top of that, you know, you being more similar in size, in my view, that's going to be a problem.
And it didn't work. Charlo kept moving, kept surviving, and Canelo couldn't cut the ring off. Now imagine the same fight, but with Terence Crawford, better rhythm, better footwork, better distance control. And when Canelo misses, Crawford's popping him, stepping off and resetting. Crawford's not going to freeze that Charlo. He's going to make Canelo pay every single time.
But tell me what you guys think.
He might. But the point is that Terence Bud Crawford is also gaining 20 pounds extra in muscle mass, which is going to affect his movement. I don't give a shit what anybody says. But once again, this is another one of these guys that just believes that Crawford, oh, well, he's a better fighter than Charlo, you know, so he just must be able to beat Canelo Alvarez. Like, dude, it don't work that way, especially when you're moving up 20 pounds. Anyway.
Terence Bud Crawford appears to be a lot bigger than boxing fans expected going to this fight with Canelo Alvarez. He seems to have the size.
Right, a size overall that he's never been at before. Isn't that interesting? And then on top of that, he is working with Victor Conte. You know, how peculiar. Now, once again, in my view, it's not really that big a deal because we already know that Canelo, that he probably has a PED supplier as well. But anyway.
To deal with what Canelo Alvarez is going to bring September 13th, but only time will tell. Like, subscribe, holla at your boy. Peace out.
Let me rewind that. Let me see overall what he said there.
To this fight with Canelo Alvarez, he seems to have the size to deal with what Canelo Alvarez is going to bring September 13th, but only time will tell.
Which, in my view, overall, once again, is not a good idea. But we'll see. But anyways, that pretty much is about it for today. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll talk to you all later.